Hey there, I'm Jonathan Acosta, joined here by our Bills analyst, Vic Carucci. The wait for football slowly getting shorter and shorter. We're now just about 2 weeks away from the start of Bills training camp at St. John Fisher. So with that, we're going to start taking a look ahead at some of the main training camp storylines for the Buffalo Bills. And we're going to do this in two separate segments. We'll do 7 topics now. We'll do 7 topics next week. And Vic, I think the number one topic going into this training camp obviously dates back to the coaching change, right? And this is going to be the first training camp for Joe Brady as the Bills head coach. Just what are you expecting to see out of Brady in this role when we get to Pittsburgh in a couple weeks?
And that's the headline, really, for this whole season. How is this going to work in 2026 when for the previous 9 seasons, it was Sean McDermott's team, Sean McDermott's culture, Sean McDermott's success. Brady steps into huge shoes. He knows that. And I think all eyes are just going to be on the fact that, okay, he's not only new, but what is he bringing to the table? We've heard about a lot of youthful energy. He's 36 years old. He's a first-year head coach. How, and I think this will be a question that will be beginning to be answered, how will he handle the immense amount of stuff that's going across his desk? Because that does start at training camp.
And now, he was the offensive coordinator moving into the head coach. Obviously, he has his hands all over the offense. But one of the other big questions is, what does the defense look like? Because under Sean McDermott, that was Sean McDermott's defense. Now it's Jim Leonhard bringing in an entirely new scheme. And for as big of a training camp as it's going to be for Joe Brady, it's obviously a huge training camp for Jim Leonhard as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep my eye really on both. Obviously, a lot of eyes on Joe Brady, but Jim Leonhard as well, because you want to see the two of them, how they interact together, and how much involvement does Joe Brady have on that defensive side. Remember, he's not the coordinator anymore of the offense, so he's got to keep an eye on that. But with Jim Leonhard, it's about, we've talked about it ad nauseum, this 3-4 scheme and what the base of the scheme is going to look like. But more than that, what's the mentality? How we've heard aggressive. Okay, how aggressive is it going to be? During camp, during those practices, I think we're going to see some different things. How they're going to create pressure. Some of that is manufactured, maybe a lot of it. Some of it is simulated. You're going to hear simulated pressure quite a bit. And it's not just those guys up front rushing the passer, the D linemen. You're bringing different combinations, linebackers, defensive backs. And how often will that happen? And then how organized does it look? Remember, you have some players that are returning who are a part of the Sean McDermott scheme. They're learning something new.
And the 3-4 part of it obviously refers to the front 7 part of that alignment. But you can make the case that the biggest position battle in this defense is in the back end, at cornerback. We know Christian Benford is solidified right. CB1. At CB2, though, you have a first-round pick from last year, Max Hairston, going up against a player that the team drafted this year that they really like in Davison Igbinosun. How do you see that playing out here in training camp?
I think this is going to be fascinating just to see these two who, of course, see their stature as first-rounders, or as, high-end picks, I should say, but a first-rounder in Hairston and Max Hairston. And, he will feel, I think, some level of entitlement to get this job. But I'm not so sure it happens that way, because I look at Igbinosun as being more physically able to fit the role of the kind of corner that Jim Leonhard wants in this defense. Big, long, tall, and also physical, very physical. I'm not so sure that Max Hairston can do that well in the physical sense. He can cover. I think once you get beyond the 5 yards and the legal area of contact, he'd be fine. But Igbinosun, physical, he can reroute receivers, and I just think that watching the two of them battle will be very interesting.
On the other side of the ball, the Bills' offensive line has had a lot of continuity to it. But now with the departure of David Edwards, there's a position battle on the offensive line at left guard. And there's some different names in the mix there, including Alec Anderson, who's been on this team. I know talking about the offensive line, maybe not as flashy, but how important is this left guard competition for the Bills in training camp, and what are you looking for there?
Yeah, it's important. I mean, I think any position up front is important. You're protecting the quarterback, and of course, you've got to make things happen in the run game. Getting James Cook to try to have another rushing championship season. However, I think it's going to come down to Alec Anderson, the incumbent, versus the newcomer, Austin Corbett, who again was brought in with the idea that he will compete and perhaps even start. This could be a case where the incumbent has a little bit of an early edge because he's been there, because he's been part of that continuity and bonding with the O-line. But I remember with Corbett, he has experience in the same type of teaching, O-line teaching, that Aaron Cromer, who retired after last season, had, because they were together with the Rams. But Anderson was part of that last year as well. So I think Corbett a little more technically sound. Anderson is the more physical.
Corbett, a new guy coming in, hoping to compete for a starting job. DJ Moore, a new guy coming in, no doubt how important he is to this offense. And obviously one of the names that I think fans are really excited to see at camp at St. John Fisher, how that chemistry develops with Josh Allen. What does this training camp look like for those two in terms of developing chemistry, and what should Bills Mafia expect to see out of Moore when they get to Pittsburgh?
Well, I think the expectations are extremely high. There is no managing those expectations because this is the number one receiver. They went out, and this was their biggest move in the offseason to address the receiver spot. So DJ Moore must hit the ground running that way. In the offseason, it looked like he was pretty much in control and understanding of what that number one role is, developing that chemistry with Josh Allen. I think there's more to go there. I think they both admit that. There were some mistakes along with some good things. He's an outstanding route runner. He understands the Joe Brady scheme very, very well and what he needs to do in it. I think he's a disciplined player from top to bottom. The question is, how big of a playmaker is he? And I think the thing to look at is what he does after he has the ball in his hand. How much of an impact can he make, again, with stretching those catches out and making big plays?
And now let's end maybe on a more positive note. Breakout candidates, because training camp there's always seems to be one or two sort of camp darlings that fans fall in love with, and maybe they don't end up making the roster, but they earned themselves a spot on the practice squad, and then maybe they're guys who we end up seeing on a game day roster later on down the season due to injury or something else. But who are some potential guys that you're just keeping an eye on and think you might have an idea that, hey, these guys have the chance to impress in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start with Skylar Bell because where he was picked, right, fourth round draft pick, is a guy that is, maybe involved as a backup, but has to earn that way. And again, this is a team that has a bunch of receivers, more experienced people in front of him. So is he a guy that impresses well enough right away to make that impact and be a part of this team from the beginning? His health will be a question too. Does he go through the whole camp? And remember, staying healthy, staying in one piece through training camp is a challenge for guys in that rookie realm who are not quite used to necessarily the level of competition. Even though he played some good competition at Boston College, this will be a different story for him.
Yeah, Skylar, I think, is definitely one of the main guys I think that we're excited to look for as well. That's just the first half of our topics. We're going to have 7 more topics to discuss next week as we get closer and closer to training camp getting started the last week of July at St. John Fisher. For Vic Carucci, I'm Jonathan Acosta for Channel 2 Sports.